Hello and welcome to this edition of Group Talk about IBM Connections with our hosts Luis Richardson, Worldwide Social Business Evangelist at IBM, and Phil Dipietro, Channel Sales Manager at IBM. Without further ado, here's Luis.
Thanks everyone for actually taking the time to spend the next 60 minutes just talking about social. One of the things that I think this is an extremely important topic for many businesses is that companies today, irregardless of what industry they happen to be in, most of them are having to deal with the question of what are they going to do as far as the social media and becoming a social business. So my role in IBM is actually to go around and have these business discussions with them. So it's more around business rather than the technology. The technology underlying it is important, but we normally start this off with somewhat of a business topic. So what I thought I'd do as kind of an introduction to you as to what we present when we think of connections and when we think of social business within companies, I thought I'd kind of walk you through what I might do with a customer. So, we start off with beliefs. We believe that people are the core of everyone's business, and the fact that how I actually think of a particular company was going to be based on the interaction I had with the latest person. In fact, just prior to getting on this call, I made a phone call to one of our local hardware stores where I had placed an order earlier this week, and I spoke to this young lady. She was able to follow up on the order. In fact, she remembered the fact that I had been in on Saturday and placed the order. To me, that gave me the impression that this person was on top of it, and it gave me a feeling about the company. So we do business people to people, although there are companies that are involved. And by nature, people are social. People will share once they're in a trusted environment. And because of that, we've seen this rise in social networks. In the consumer space, people are just really engaged with social networks. This is where we put up a slide that talks about Facebook being the third largest country in the world or something. But that's no longer needed to be shown because we understand that. What we don't understand, though, from a business perspective, is how do we take and leverage this social capital in our business? How do we take this and bring this into our companies? And when I ask people about bringing this into their companies, normally I'm faced with someone like this who sits across a desk from me and says, why in the world should we be using social software? And this may be a financial person. It may be the chief executive officer. In fact, I love this picture because the guy doesn't even have a PC on his desk. He wants to know, why am I going to do this and why am I going to do it now? When I introduce myself to companies, I'll often ask them, what do they think of when we talk about social software or social media? And I'll get answers like Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube. Those kind of things kind of roll off the tongue, but often people just think of that as somewhat of a distraction. So I have a chance to share with them the differences. I differ social software, especially in businesses, is a difference between a vitamin and an aspirin. If I were to come to someone and say, I have this vitamin for you, it's going to make you feel better. It'll perk you up. It'll feel nicer. You'll be more fun to be around. Well, that's a vitamin. But if I were to look at you and observe the fact that you were rubbing your head, you look like you had a headache, and I said, you must have a tremendous headache. I have an aspirin that's actually going to take that headache away. It's more likely that you're going to purchase the aspirin from me before I can possibly talk you into the vitamin. And actually, most people, when they think of social, they think of it somewhat as a vitamin. It's a nice to have. Yeah, it would be kind of nice if our people could chat, and yeah, it'd be kind of nice if, for HR, for those people who are trying to engage the younger generation workers, maybe that's nice. But in reality, it's all about solving business pain. It's all about solving aspirins and addressing the headaches. And so what I ask companies to do is, determine where does it hurt. Describe the pain. And in the conversations that we've had with companies, it's very easy for them to describe friction points and places where they have pain, especially as we start to describe them some of the pains that other people feel. A lot of them can relate to that. I did a session several years ago now in which I had a couple of hundred people in a room, and I talked to them about the social software and the business pains that might be addressed. And I asked at the end of the session for each of them to draw a picture of a pain. I gave them all paper, and they asked them to actually sketch out pictures, and I've scanned them. I've got several hundred of them, but I'll show you a couple of them here, and I use these often when I speak because people can kind of relate to this. So this one person described their pain and drew their pain as who's who in the zoo. And this is where executives will say, I want to know what my company knows. And that's a fairly common thing for executives. I know my organization, but I've actually had people extend that to say, I want to know the potential of my company. One retailer I met with recently said, I could have someone who I've hired maybe on the store somewhere on the floor managing an electronics department or working in an electronics department, just stocking the shelves. Maybe this is a college new hire. But I don't know, for instance, that college new hire has an electronic engineering degree and maybe a minor in business management. This is someone that might be a very good candidate later on for maybe a sectional host or someone who manages my electronics department. I don't know what the potential is. Other companies in the day where we're trying to actually move into different markets, often a company will say, I need to move into a separate market. I'm particularly dealing with this type of a customer, and I'm going to move to this other customer. I wonder if there's anybody in my company that has any experience there. Well, often that's not on someone's resume that's easy to get to. And so what you have to do within this organization is you need to have people, which is our focus, because remember, people are the core. We want to make people prominent. And so how do we do that? Well, people have to know each other, and they need to be known. And so it's important for a person to have, in this case, a profile page. And when you look at this, you think, well, yeah, it looks kind of like a Facebook page or something, and truly it is. It gives you the ability, for instance, to take information from your HR system and from certification systems, all the structured data that you might have within a person's identification, and actually import this into this page. And it gives you things like reporting structures and how do I get in touch with them. But more importantly, on the right-hand side, if you notice this thing called network, it also tells you who this person hangs around with, which is often a telling thing. Often the people they hang around with aren't necessarily the people they report to, or maybe even the people that are under the same manager. Often this is a case of, that's who these people know. I've stepped into roles in the past where I've stepped into someone else's job, and I've gone and looked at their network to see who is it that they depend on, who do they have as contacts. Additionally, this allows a person to say things like, this is my expertise, this is my background, maybe this is what I'm looking forward to doing. Maybe I'm going to school at night to become a better a consultant, or maybe I'm going to school at night to become an accountant. Those types of things might be helpful when someone's looking for extra. And in most organizations, in fact, because I do this from a worldwide perspective, it's interesting how across most of our countries today, companies are facing what they're calling the silver tsunami. Organizations, people who know what's going on in companies, people who have a lot of the knowledge and the soul of the companies are preparing for retirement. And this is just one case. This particular example shows an age thing where you've got the people who are considered the leaders of the organization. They're facing retirement. They're happy. They just have smiles on their faces because they're retiring. But their knowledge is basically going to be tossed away, because if you look across this gap, you have new recruits, or you have people in the organization who are just coming in, and then they're not able to get to that knowledge, and don't know how to access it. This is also the point if we speak of ages. And by the way, I happen to be on the right-hand side of this. I'm 54, and although I'm hopefully years away from retirement, I don't fall into this new recruit stage. But when I think of how our leaders and when we think of our more mature workers in our organizations, how they communicate with one another, and I ask that question, I'll get responses like, well, they'd like to talk on the phone, they walk into people's offices, and they may use email. But on the left side of this equation, you have these new recruits who are doing things like, tweeting and posting things, and rarely might they use email prior to coming into a business. These new recruits know how to have great conversations and find answers with just 140 characters. Whereas the people on the right-hand side, if they're like me, you can't even say hello in 140 characters. And so not only do you have this, I have a lot of knowledge on the right-hand side that I need to transfer to the left, but it's just a matter, too, of the left-hand side, the new recruits, people coming in wanting to know who are the leaders and how do I reach them. If you take the age away from this square and just say, let's say this is a long-standing project. Maybe I'm in a company where I have close relationships with certain clients. This could just be a client team. And you've been in a situation where you've been introduced to a new team, you're the new recruit or new person on that client team, and all the people that have been there before know all about the client, they know how the relationships, they know where everything's hidden, and there you are as a new person having to face kind of breaking in and understanding, well, who knows what, and if I have a question, who do I go to for answers? So this is a big problem in companies throughout. And the way you can address that, number one, is with the profile pages. That helps. But an extension of the profile page is the ability to do these social tagging. And this is a very low-impact, high-value thing that social has brought to us. What this allows us to do is for individuals like myself to tag myself with little tags that say, here's my expertise, here's my background. I've seen organizations that are client-facing. A person, when they get on a team, let's say I'm working with the XYZ distributor company, then I might tag myself XYZ distributor. And what that does is that allows people looking for skills to find me. I can also tag myself with specialties. In my case, I've done a lot of work with electronic with enterprise content management systems. I've had 30 years in document management, and so ECM is one of my tags. In addition to my tagging myself, other people can tag me. And this is where it's interesting from a perspective of someone active in a social network, is people will tag you. They'll get on the phone with you. Maybe you're in a conversation. They find out that you have particular skills, let's say in the telecommunications industry. And then you get a little email that says, this person tagged you with telecom expert. And what that does is it allows you, first of all, to say, that's not my expertise, let me take that off. But as an individual, it allows you to say, well, okay, that's where someone perceives my value. That's okay, I'll leave that there. And then as other people need to find a telecom expert, I might come up on the list. This is where people build their value and build their worth. Some people look at this and say, well, this is just going to cause me burden because people are going to be reaching out to me for things that I don't want to be burdened with more questions. It actually is a very efficient way for people to find information, and you'll find that it's of no harm actually to be known as experts. It's actually it helps you broaden your own experience and broaden your value within the company. Also, a great way to find leadership is to look in areas of communities. And communities are just places where, through the social network, you're able to say, here's a community of people we want to have discussing a particular topic, or people are interested in a particular thing. Like I previously mentioned, you could have a community around a client engagement. And so inside of this community will be people, they'll discuss what's going on with the client, they'll keep records of what they've done, the documents that they've shared, discussions that they've had. This will happen inside this community rather than inside of an email or inside of other places. You'll have this inside this community. And communities can be closed, where you can only come in based on invitation. They can be where people can see them, but maybe they can't participate unless they've actually joined. And some communities can be just wide open. Within IBM and with many of our customers that we serve, communities are a very handy way for them to gather not just knowledge, but gather people together so that you can ask questions. For instance, if I were looking for an expert, if I were looking for someone who had information about travel and transportation, let's say I'm going to go visit a trucking company later this week, and I'm looking for some information of what some of the business pains that are happening in the trucking industry, I would then come to this travel and transportation space, where I would then see articles about what's happening. I'd see, more importantly, people. I'd find people in here. Maybe I'd click on an article and I'd find a particular article of interest in a blog or a forum. That article might be of interest to me, but more important is it actually links me back to the person. It links me back to the author. Maybe I find an article that I think is interesting and somebody's commented on it. The comment itself takes me back to the person who made the comment. So it's back to that people-centric view, driving me back to the leaders where I can actually find value. So it's more about the creator rather than the creation or the content itself. As I mentioned, we hoard a lot of stuff in email, and this is a particular individual who shared this drawing. I spoke to them afterwards, and actually they said the problem with their company was that people would work at their company, and if you think of yourself, think about your own email box. At this point in most presentations, I'll ask people, what do they feel? What is their emotional feeling when I say the word email? And often it's one of guilt or despair or overload or distraction or whatever. Rarely do I have someone jump up and raise their hand and say, I'm really excited about my email, and I'm excited about the new emails I'm going to be getting today while I'm listening to this talk. Most of us, email has become a bit of a place where information goes to die. And in this particular executive's case, she told me what happened at their company was that people would work at their company for years, and then maybe they'd leave due to retirement or they'd go to another job. And what was left was their email box. And their email box was basically deleted because no one, first of all, they couldn't risk just having it around, and no one wanted to go through it and try to figure out what was there. And what she realized over time was not only were they deleting, for instance, documents or things that might be important that were only in this person's email box, but they were also deleting trails of information, decisions that have been made, why decisions were made. A lot about what we did in business is captured inside of our emails. So think about your own email box and think about how many conversations take place inside your email box that would probably be beneficial to be more of an open record, a place where other people could get to it, maybe some other people interested in the client. Think about how often we answer the question of, so what's going on with this customer? I've been assigned. The next thing you know, you're just added to an email thread, and that's how they expect you to get the information. The way we actually change this within IBM, and I'm an example of someone who can make the change. I'm actually at a point now to where my email box every day is empty because I just don't have conversations inside of email. We do it differently here. I have a gentleman, Luis Suarez, who is a fellow IBMer. just celebrated his 4th anniversary, I think, at IBM without using email. And so, one day 4 years ago, he just said, "This is nonsense. I think there's better ways to communicate." And he began using things like the social network to do that. And he's a very influential and impactful person, even though he doesn't use email. But what we do instead is we do things like we have communities and teams. If I have something that I want to share, I'll put it in a social network. If I have a document like this presentation, when I share this inside of IBM, instead of sending it around to people, I basically just put it in my files area. That way people know that they can come and get it. What happens is people will ask me, "Louis, I have a question for you about something." If they ask the question and it seems to me that it's a question that other people might ask, if they say, "Louis, what are you doing for dinner tonight?" I might respond back with an email. But if they were asked, "Louis, what's Connections doing with business intelligence for the next year?" I'll say, "An interesting question. In fact, instead of just typing in an email, I'll just write a little blog entry, or I'll put a file inside of a community area or somewhere, then I'll send them a link to that. And then later when someone asks the same question, I just send them a link. I just go to that same document and say, share this with this next person." And then what happens is over time is I'll go back to that document, that blog posting, whatever it is, I put that information, and I'll find that 100 people have downloaded it or 100 people have looked at it. And that, to me, represents 98 emails that I possibly didn't get. And so by actually having conversations, when possible, outside of inbox, you actually save time. So by storing files in the context of a community, if we have something going on, this happens to be a human resource community you're looking at here. If there's documents that I think new employees need, I would put it here, for instance. And that way I wouldn't have to actually post them inside of an intranet. We share ideas using rich media. And so with our social network allows you to do things like put in little video clips and multimedia things for people to actually use and share ideas. It's becoming much more common. In fact, a conversation this morning with a retailer was telling me that their marketing people, when they go to the stores, they want to be able to use their BlackBerries and their smartphones to capture videos of the way their products are being displayed in maybe substandard or maybe unique ways. You want to be able to capture those, load them up in a community where the marketing people can look at them and actually learn from them. So rich media is becoming a much more part of the conversation. And we also use things like activities. And this activities is more of maybe a structured approach. Someone says we want to have a webinar. Well, that email might come to me and say, "Louis, you need to organize a webinar." I just take that email and basically drag it into the sidebar inside, for instance, my notes client. I can just drag it into the sidebar to activities, and the email becomes part of the activity. And then I start assigning it off. Okay, so Phil, I want you to gather the people together. I need you to need someone else to do this other work. And this activity basically is the place where we do work. What this alleviates is all the emails that go around where people to assign people to stay up to date. Let's say this activity, this happens to be a state of Utah service improvement activity that we did. We did presentations, we did engagement documents, we pulled in documents that were high, initiatives and so forth. And let's say you came to this project late and you were supposed to do the presentation. It'd be nice to actually just go to this activity and see what happened previously, who's worked on this before, where are we with this project. The activity also becomes a bit of a record. So next year, let's say it's a contract renewal that you're doing. Next year, you can go back to the activity from last year and determine what was done and what to improve this year. I love using activities myself when I go into, let's say I travel a lot, and so when I'm on the road and I go to an area, like I'll go to the Nordics for 2 weeks. Well, during that 2-week time, we'll just set up an activity for people to book my time. I'm never asked a question via email, "Louis, are you available or not?" I'm never being told, "Louis, can you meet with this customer?" or "Louis," it's all in the activity. The reps know where to go to book my time and to schedule things. And from there, they're able to say things, okay, so if Louis is going to be out in Kista in Sweden, then we're actually going to have him come down to Stockholm, but it'll take him an hour, and so let's schedule it for this time. All of this happens, coordination, the managers have told us it saves them hours and hours of time. All this happens inside of activities. No emails are generated. The beauty of that is not only the fact that I don't have to keep answering emails and they're depending on me to say yes or no to things. I just know it's being taken care of. So when I actually set my travel and when I go in site, I don't worry about what I'm doing tomorrow because it's in the activity. I just find in the activity what I'm doing tomorrow, and there's a list, and there's what I'm supposed to be, where I'm supposed to meet, and so forth. But I found the great beauty of this is a month from now, I'm going to send an expense report to my boss that's going to be an expense for 2 weeks in the Nordics, and he's going to ask, "Why did you go? Why am I actually paying this?" And instead of going back and sending him a lengthy email or going through all my calendar invites and all my notes, I just send him to the activity and say, "Chris, everything I did is inside of this activity. If you have any questions, let me know. It saves everyone time, effort. It's a business pain that we've actually addressed. Within most companies, you have organizational boundaries that are faced. This particular drawing denotes someone who has an idea, and let's say they're in a particular place. If we look at it from a retail standpoint, or from let's say a grocery store, someone who's a safety officer or someone who's a store manager at some particular grocery store comes across this idea. He sees this maybe on an intranet. He sees an article about safety inside of grocery stores. An interesting fact, one of the leading causes of slip and fall within grocery stores are grapes. Grapes that are on the floor. That's what causes the customers to actually slip and fall. So maybe this guy sees this web article about some guy that says, you know what, if you display your grapes, above a display of oranges, if any grapes break loose and fall, they'll fall within the gaps of the oranges and they won't fall on the floor. And this guy goes, that's a great idea. I'll change my displays that way. It'll save me from having these complaints and so forth. But he finds this article and he's like, I'd like to share that, but I don't know who all the other store managers are. I don't know anybody in other stores who would even care. So you have this bright idea. And these bright ideas, by the way, come to us all the time. Think about how often you're on the web, you find an answer, or you come across a solution and you say, this might be helpful to other people in my organization, but I have no idea who they are. So we allow, for instance, one track of doing this is with social bookmarks. I'm in a browser, I find this particular article, and by the way, the TED Talks are wonderful things. If you're not familiar with TED, I'd encourage you to to go to TED.com and start looking at some of the videos. It's actually addicting, so don't do it at work. But for instance, a TED Talk, this is a great one about how great leaders inspire action. I think it's wonderful. Instead of just bookmarking it to my browser where I might get to it later, and my bookmarks in my browser look a whole lot like my email, just cluttered, I want to now bookmark it more socially. So what I do is I click on a link, and it just says, okay, you're going to bring in this new bookmark. It pulls information from the page. I give it tags, and the tags I give it are things about this that I think are important to IBMers, how other people within the IBM community might look for this. And so I might use words like evangelism or sales positioning or whatever that might, when people would search for those types of things, they'd find this as a resource. I can store it just as a private bookmark, only I can see. I can make it more public where people who follow me will actually look at my bookmarks and see what I might be interested in, what I've found recently. And I can even point it at a community. In this case, I'm pointing it at a community I belong to called the Lotus Sales Community. This is particularly relevant to selling. And so I actually want to send this link to the community as part of its bookmark so that people who join the community or follow the community will actually have access to this. And further down I can actually start a discussion and we can start a dialogue about this particular thing. Most companies are geographically dispersed. People are on the road, people are mobile, and it's hard to keep track of what's going on. People are creating documents and proposals and spreadsheets and contracts and things that are happening all the time that I might find benefit of actually leveraging. Let's say somebody creates a contract or someone's going to go visit a company and I know something about that, or I might like to know something about that. People have ideas, as I mentioned before. Someone has a bright idea about how to put a sales play together or how to put these two products together. How do I actually share those ideas? And then there are also people that come into my organization that I just don't know. How do I keep track of that? Social actually allows you to keep track of what people are doing and thinking. We use a concept called microblogging, which is like status updates. This just lets a person and individuals just to say, here's what I'm working on today, or here's a question I might have. And microblogs actually are embedded, and you'll see later how they're embedded in the way we work, so that it's very easy for people to update these. And for anyone looking at this saying, well, that looks like Twitter, and yeah, we're going to get a lot of, I'm going outside to get a cigarette now, or I'm going down to get a coffee, and now I'm coming back from getting a coffee, and a lot of chatter that happens inside of these things. You'll find that that's not the case. What happens mostly in businesses is people will put business relevant things. I'm visiting this customer today. I'm looking for a particular reference. Does anyone have that? Microblogs for us has become a great alternative to email in that you can actually post questions and post them kind of not just directly at a person, but you can post them as a topic. I'll give you an example. On my profile board, which you saw earlier, our profile page, people will post, I can post my status, but people can also post questions. I was with a customer not long ago. I happened to be in Mexico City. I came out and looked at my iPad, and I was actually looking for what was happening with my network, and I saw someone had posted a question. And the question was from a guy named John. He posted a question. It was how do you install the Connections widget in the Notes sidebar using Java something? It was a technical question. I had no idea what the answer was. I could hardly understand the question. But looking right underneath that question, the answer was posted. Someone else had answered it, and they'd answered it correctly. John had thanked them. Now, the question was 4 hours old. I'd been with this customer for 4 hours. The question was 4 hours old. The answer was 3.5 hours old. In other words, the person got their question answered within 30 minutes, well before I ever saw the question. So number one, that was a benefit. The other thing that was important was I went to John, and I actually asked John, I said, John, you posted this question on my board, and I don't know the answer to that question. And his answer to me was enlightening. He said, Louis, I know you don't know, but people that you know. And what he had done was he basically used the social networks to actually say, I know Louis doesn't know the answer to this question, which has happened often the case with Louis. I don't know the answer, but I know people who do know the answer. And so instead of sending me an email saying, Louis, do you know someone who knows how to do this? He just said, I'm going to ask you and the audience of the people who follow you and the people who you work with. And when I ask this question, someone's going to jump in and answer. And so instead of sending me an email and having me send another email, even 4 hours before I even saw it, this would happen. And this kind of thing happens all the time. Someone asked a question the other day. I posted I was going to Sweden. I was in the U.S. I'm coming to Sweden next week. A guy said, great to see you next week. By the way, how do I find this particular information? Someone from Denmark answered their question, actually answered it in Swedish, and he thanked them. And that happened all before I woke up because they're 6 hours ahead of us. So microblogs are not just a great way of just keeping track of what people are doing, but it's also a great way of communicating, sharing ideas, and getting answers. Likewise, people will post their ideas in wikis. It's more of a collaborative effort. You can put your ideas out there. People can share them. Wikis are also, you can put in graphics and other things, and you can actually comment and see other people's comments, and it gives you versions. You can attach things to wikis. People have, like I said earlier, we can have blogs, but you can also have ideation blogs. And this is something that's kind of unique to our product, but it's built off of something that's very old here at IBM, which is idea jams. Often IBM will open the doors and say, let's talk about a topic, or let's see what people have to say about something. And so they'll open up the conversation to a broad audience, even our customers, and say, what do you think about projects around a smarter planet? And for a couple of weeks, we'll have this discussion. And at the close of that, we will then look at what people's ideas were, what people talked about. Within the context of your social system, you can use this thing called ideation blogs. And you can set up a topic. And for instance, this is inside of a human resources community. This topic might be, tell us ideas around how we might better handle the onboarding of employees. And then what people will do is they'll post their ideas. Other people can comment on them, maybe help them define them better. But then people will vote. And you can actually set apart and say, for once we get 5 votes, I want this idea to be graduated. Or once we get 50 votes, I want this order to be graduated. And what it's graduated to is actually back to that idea of an activity, where someone will then have to take a look at it. They'll pass judgment on it. Maybe it's something that they'll go to marketing or whatever as a new idea, or in this case to HR as maybe a new best practice. It allows people to have input, to see value in their input. And we've had companies that have adopted our software that have actually built new products based on things like these ideation blogs that they can then attribute. We've actually made X amount of dollars by implementing a social network and coming up with new ideas. So this is a real business driving type feature. Discussion forums. Many of us in the technical community are familiar with things like discussion forums within our support networks, but also within social networks. It's also good. So let's say even a sales community, you might want to have a discussion forums where people can give their best ideas and best practices. And blogs, again, are just another way for people to throw out ideas, put down topics of interest, get feedback. The system actually is one where it'll actually start recommending. Often is the case, I say, I think I know what I'm looking for, but I'm not sure where it's going to be, or I can kind of describe the person who might be able to answer this question, but I'm not really sure who that person is. And the system itself, because it monitors what you do and how you do it and how other people work and behave, will actually begin to recommend things for you. So you might go looking for someone by typing in a few tags. I'm looking for an architect with this particular client's background, and I'm looking for someone in a particular geography, so you type in California. It may come back and say, here's a person, and maybe, or here's a list of people, and you click on a person, and that takes you to the profile. Well, while you're looking at that person, the system will also tell you, by the way, you might want to know these other people. Here's other individuals that might be interesting to you based on the fact that you've looked for this particular person. Here's another person that fits the same profile, but by the way, maybe you're more connected with them. You didn't know that you share 3 communities with this person, or you've been tagged by this person. Maybe they're a closer relationship to you. You could go look for a document. I'm looking for a particular presentation, and you're kind of zeroed in on the document. And you actually find that document. You find a presentation that fits your need. The system will also tell you, hey, look, besides presentations, there's a whole community over here that's talking about this topic. Or here's a blog entry that you might want to look at from the same author on the same topic. So recommendations are great to kind of help people adopt the social network, because it's more than just the search and find method that we normally see on our websites and inside of our repositories. It gives you more of a rounding, what I call kind of a peripheral vision of things that are going on, so that not only the stuff that you're actually hard focused on, there might be things just a little bit off on the periphery that you might find not only interesting but beneficial. And of the 200 drawings I collected, about a third of them look something like this. I just don't know where information is. It's hard for me to find information. I'll often ask companies, so where do you put your stuff? And that answer usually comes back, well, it depends. And then they begin describing all the different places people may store ideas and information and content. I mentioned earlier that I've been in the content world for a long time. It was so long that I can remember the day when it was just difficult to get information from point A to point B. Making information available was an issue. We did telexes, we did all kinds of things in order to get information from one point to the other. The internet kind of solved that for us, and so information availability is not an issue. But then came the, is it accurate? Which bred a whole raft of document management, enterprise content management solutions, again, of which I was a part. But it was all about, let's take this content that's out there, let's categorize it, let's put it in storage containers, let's make sure it's accurate, so it's the right version, and maybe it's the approved version. Now, many organizations stop right here, but one of the things that we're finding is that there's a business pain around the fact that I still have too much information. If I do a search, even if I do what I think is a very intelligent search and using meta tags or whatever, I still find too much stuff, or I find stuff that's out of date, or I find stuff that's worthless. So it comes down to, is it credible? It's available, it's accurate, but is it credible? Does it have value? And the only way you can have value is actually if you go back to the creator, or back to kind of the person. So let's say you do a search and you find something. You search inside your company, you're looking for a particular piece of information, you have this broad search that's taking place. It'd be nice to know, first of all, when you found something, who created it? And do they have any skills? Do they know what they're talking about? Is this just someone just playing around with this idea? Or is this someone who actually is an expert? If I were looking for tax advice, I'd want to make sure that person had tax background or had some fiscal background. I wouldn't want someone of the age of my son, for instance, just giving me tax advice based on something he read on on the internet or something. But more importantly, is the case, it's not just who created it, but what have other people said about this? I usually remind people of how they buy books online. You look for a topic, you look for a book, you find a book. The next thing you look at is maybe the author, what their background is, but authors are always going to say great things about themselves. Our eyes almost immediately go down to readers' reviews. What have other people said about this? More importantly, what have other people like me said about this? There are people who will comment that I can relate to. Often is the case, I'll go look for a book. I'll see a reader's review and they'll say, well, this book was, seemed to be very repetitive and didn't offer many good examples or good analogies. But this other book I found really liked. I'm going to be drawn to the other book because I like analogies and I like, stories. And so often how other people have used this. So when I'm within an organization and I'm looking for a document, let's say I'm within IBM and I look for a document, I could find a document, a presentation, whatever. In this case, I'm inside of a blog article and there's happens to be my name, but you have any person's name show up, I can just hover over their name and get this virtual business card. And this virtual business card states who the person is, how to reach them, but also it gives me an idea of I can go to their files. What other things have they stored? What have they contributed to as far as wikis or what's their profile? What's their background? Again, it gives me a chance to actually know the author better. And anywhere a person's name exists, so this could be the author, this could be a person who's commented on the file, it actually gives me access to the people. So imagine, if you will, you found an article, you think it's interesting, but you'd like to know more information. It's actually very good to be able to reach right out to the author and ask them. The other thing that the system does is if you look here just above where the business card is, it says what comments that someone's made, how many visits it's had, and over on the right-hand side is like a little star with 2 on it. That means 2 people have recommended it. That gives me a bit of a valuation of what is this content like. Are people enjoying it? Are they using it? And maybe who's using it? Who's actually, how have they used it? Likewise, if I find content inside of a library, I'm inside of a document storage place within the social system. Not just can I do this on blogs and wikis, but I can find it in a document. So here's a document. Here's the author. Her name is Min Lee. I'm able to access her business card, and from here, I can actually see the little green dot shows me that she's online, meaning that she's accessible via instant messaging. So I could actually chat with her even before downloading the document or looking at it and saying, Min, I'm looking for this particular thing. I found this particular document. Is this a good one, or do you have something better? Or are you working on something differently? So again, a great way for you to have credentials directly from the content. And we're also about taking the social that we're talking about, this people aspect, and putting it in the context of your work. And so people who are, say, working in the notes environment or notes, they're working in an email client, the social becomes part of that work. So as I'm in email, I can actually see who this person is, what their background is. I can actually go in and find a person's name and say, show me, I'm not sure who this person was that sent me this email, show me the relative background of the conversations we've had in the past, and it will actually show me what postings have been made, how we've chatted, emails. It gives me kind of a dossier of my conversations with this person, and then I can say, oh yeah, I remember, that's what we've talked about in the past, so that's what this email must be about, or what this meeting is invited to is about. We do this, by the way, also with other email clients. So if it's an Outlook client, we actually work with that as well. You can say, and many companies will say, well, we've already got some content. We've got some things, say, in content repositories. This is where we actually bridge the gap between some of the more structured content that might be around, let's say, in a FileNet system or in a content manager system. And we work with other document stores as well, where you can say, I've got some content, but it's kind of a library. It's kind of a repository sitting over there. And what would really be nice is for us to have a social environment around it. So if you think about having a repository of policies and procedures, well, it'd be nice to wrap that with a community around policies and procedures where people could have discussions and maybe share ideas. An ideation blog, for instance, on some new ideas for new policies. Maybe there'd be a place for people to upload videos of infractions of those policies, or places where that policy maybe is out of line and should be updated. But yet I still need to have that content. That content's in that repository. It's secured. It's records managed. It goes through workflows, whatever. We can actually surface that. This happens to be an example of a FileNet repository that's being surfaced inside of a community talking about air transportation systems. From here, I can actually click on a document, and as just someone working in a social network, I can download a document, I can check it out, I can check it in, I can manage the properties of it. I can do all the things I could do, say, from a more of a FileNet structure, but now I can do that from within my social system. We don't override the FileNet properties. We don't override the FileNet structure. So if I don't have access to it from FileNet, I won't have access to it here. But what it does is it allows you to surface these things in a more of a social and usable environment. And we found a lot of people have extended their FileNet content management systems and so forth to a larger audience of people, because by putting them inside of a social network or a social wrapper, it kind of makes them more consumable and more relevant. And by the way, we can do that as well with SharePoint. So if you have systems that are SharePoint, in fact, we wrap SharePoint extremely well to the point that we're actually having some social activities around socializing SharePoint. So if you have any interest in that further, I can also help you with that. So the types of things I tell companies to do, first of all, you can't get trapped. You can't look at this from the outside and just say, this is something I might be interested in. You need to start action. So there's 5 steps. The first one is get started. I can't tell you the number of times I've sat with organizations, and for instance, if I'm working with an IT organization, for instance, they'll say things like, well, we need to get control of this. We need to know how people are going to use wikis, and we need to have a tag dictionary, and we need to know how people are going to, how they'll fill out their profile, or how do we get them to put their pictures on their page. You can't figure that out. Don't bother. Just move on. Get started. The value actually is in doing it. For instance, in IBM, 450,000 people, probably half of us have pictures. But it doesn't make the system any less useful. It's still very useful. It's just that some people choose not to put their picture in, or some people choose not to fill out their profile a lot. It doesn't matter. Just move. Get going. The second one is identify the socially active. And for this, it's a very easy thing to do. It's just to identify those people in the company who are already using the social network. I'll sometimes ask companies, so what are you doing with Facebook? And they'll say, well, we're not doing anything with Facebook. And I'll correct them by saying, well, I looked this morning and you have 4 Facebook pages that have your brand on it. There are people within organizations who are using things like Twitter and LinkedIn to do business. They're doing it because they need a social outlet. They need this outlet. Sometimes it's not sanctioned by the company. Sometimes it's just allowed to happen. In this case, you actually find those people and you bring them in and say, look, we're launching this social initiative within our company, and you're going to be a major part of it because you're already there, and we're going to ask you to help us. So find the socially active, find the contributors. These are the groups of people in the organization who are probably asking for their email quotas to be up. They're the ones who spend all their time answering questions. This is, in some cases like me with this particular topic, it's a matter of showing these people how, if they answer their questions, if they think about taking their conversations into a social network, how it will actually save them time. I know I save myself 4 or 5 hours a week because I don't answer emails a second time. I don't have to answer a question, for the most part, a second time. And by doing that, it gives me actually time to start proactively answering questions before they're asked. And because it saves me time, that's why I use social. And so if you find the contributors, the content, the information, the knowledge will be stored in the social network, everyone will follow. And with that, you need to reward the followers. Because if you start making announcements about, we're going to reward this guy because he wrote 30 blogs last week, most people can't relate to that. Most people will say this person needs to find a job because, how can they possibly have the time to write 30 blogs? The reality is they might be doing taking a very leadership approach and maybe doing blogs instead of email and maybe doing things efficiently, but most people can't relate to them. But if someone like that grocery store person posts something that's important, I find it, I post it, I actually use that within my company or my grocery store. I find that my slip and fall accidents have decreased 50%. I post that, or I make a comment, take that story and share it, because everyone can follow. And leaders will actually lead. Sometimes you need to reward the followers. And most importantly, this has to be, you have to find an executive sponsor. So when you're approaching this with your companies and with your customers, you have to find someone who can change the culture. It's not just about going to a CIO and changing the technology. In fact, this is not a technology issue. And in most cases, in fact, almost all cases that I can think of, the technology people have not led this. This is about change in culture. This is about change in behavior. So it's corporate comms, it's branding, it's HR people, it's even the CEO level that can do this. And so you have to find executive sponsors and get them to actually help you change the way their company thinks and behaves. There's a lot of content, there's a lot of social things out there that are free. There's a lot of competitors in the space. The reason we think IBM is important is because there are so many things that are out there. Because if you just allow this thing to happen, what will happen is people will say, well, I'll put our training videos in YouTube, and I'll put our marketing materials up here in Flickr, and we'll blog over here in Blogger, and we'll do some stuff over here in Yammer. We'll chat about Yammer. And all of a sudden, you're spread across everything in the organization, and it's confusing. It's a distraction, okay? And you can't afford to have these distractions. And plus, you need to have these things integrated in with your business. And so you want to stay away from these niche vendors, as well as business applications. There are CRM systems out there today and ERP systems that are trying to add social to what they do. And all they're doing is they're making the CRM system social, but they're not making the business social. They're making the ERP system social, but they're not making the entire business social. And basically what you end up is with the pockets of social. You can't afford that. You can't afford these silos of social. You need to have a social underpinning under which your CRM system can work, your ERP system can work, all your business applications can work. In most cases, it's a matter of owning the conversation. If you are using Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, you don't own that conversation. And plus, the fact that you're having a conversation out there. I'm from Savannah in Georgia, which is in the South, and one of the things that I was told growing up is live your life in such a way that you could actually sell the family parrot to the town gossip. And that means you should live life so purely that everyone can know everything that you're doing. We don't do that in business, and we don't expect to live that way. But if you're out there actually tweeting, for instance, if I were to tweet, I'm going to go see XYZ distributor company, my competitors follow my Twitter account. I don't own that conversation. Other people can join in on that. A lot of the conversations that are out there, like if I'm using Yammer, or if I'm using some other competitors, the conversation is actually owned by someone else. And in many cases, they use things like LinkedIn. A lady stood up in one of the recent conventions and said, we got a problem. Our president, our past CEO, we actually fired because of unethical behavior. But on his LinkedIn account, he still says he's the CEO of our company. How do we get him to take that off? And the answer is you don't, because you don't own that conversation. So you need to own the conversation. They're assets. These decisions that are made, these ideas that are spread, are things that you as a company should actually be aware of and actually be able to take advantage of. As far as social applications, one of the big things about IBM is that we don't believe in just adding a social application. It's not adding IBM Connections to your profile of things to do. It's actually embedding that in your business. And so this happens to be an example of our W3 page, our inside the IBM page. So when I go to the intranet, this is what I see. And the whole middle of the page is set up to what am I working on? And so I just type in, that's my status update. On the right-hand side, the people search. Below my status update is what other people in my organization are doing. A lot of people, if you ask about what's going on with IBM, are you using Connections, many people will say, I don't use Connections, or I'm not sure what you're talking about. And then we'll ask them, well, how do you find people? And they say, well, we use the people search function. Well, they're using Connections. Or how do you keep track of what other people are doing? Well, I use my status updates. So by embedding it inside the work people do, it will make it useful. And there are niche vendors out there. There are people who will do content. For instance, SharePoint's a great content company. They do content, but content basically alone, and just dabble in the social world. There's conversation people like Yammer and others that do that. There's community kind of focused people like Jive. They do bits and pieces, but what you really need is you need all of these things, but you need a people-centric model, and that's one of the things that we with IBM do particularly well. And so we encourage people to plant the seed and watch it grow. If you empower your people, use the strengths that are there, engage in their ideas, listen as well as talk. This is an open dialogue. You need to have a conversation with people. That's part of being social, is you allow people to speak up and you actually engage with them. And then you celebrate the unexpected. The guy who posted a question on my board because I didn't know the answer, but he knew that other people did, that was something I would have never expected. It would never be a benefit that I would think of the system, but people are amazing, and they'll come up with some really bright things. So with this presentation, there'll also be some links to some things you can get to around becoming a social business. There's some social business guidelines that are available from us. There's a social business community, which is the second link here. And then there's, I actually have a slide share with audio of this. It's called Ideas at Work, that's out there on SlideShare that you can actually listen to, as well as you can share with your customers if you'd like to get them introduced to this. And there's some YouTube videos as well. You can reach me through these means, as well as through local IBM reps. But I want to thank you for your attendance. So we'll open it for questions now, Dawn, I guess.
Thanks, Louis. There was a couple of questions that came through as you were presenting. The first one was around what versions of Connections the screenshots you were showing were.
Yeah, most of the versions of screenshots that are there are either current shipping or older products. In fact, I was just looking at those going, gee, those are some old shots. So this is nothing that you saw there was any future stuff. The stuff that we have currently shipping, I try to stay behind the curve, so to speak, so that when people ask questions about like integrating social mail or integrating calendars, it's one of those things I can say, yes, we can do that, but it's in our Connections Next, which will be shipping later this year.
Okay. Speaking of that, one of the questions was, could you give us any sort of hint to the future of what's coming in Connections Next?
Yeah. Absolutely. So what we've done is we've basically pulled together a lot of the social capabilities that are currently shipping in Connections, and now we're actually expanding the next versions of Connections. And again, I'm speaking things that are publicly known, I guess, from Lotusphere. We're integrating things like mail, social mail, so that as I'm in my Connections client or I'm inside my social network, I can actually have access to my mail. Things like social calendars. So instead of just having a link maybe to my notes calendar or to my Outlook calendar, I can actually have a calendar around events around a community. There's some things on activity streams where right now I can monitor what's going on in my social network, but I might want to also bring in things from external sources. I might want to bring in feeds of, tell me what's going on in my LinkedIn accounts, or tell me what's happening in other places. Most of what we're building upon and what we're extending is using a standard called Open Social, which is a standard that IBM, I think, is chairing now, that committee. But it's around how do you actually exchange social information from one system to another, because lines are blurring between what is business social and what is personal social, but yet there is still a line there that you want to differentiate with. But often is the case when I'm in business, I'd like to see the feeds coming from these things so that I can actually keep aware of other social systems, maybe that my customers and others are using as well, that I want to kind of keep track of. So we're looking at integrating more into the social experience so that people can remain, at work and still be social.
Okay. One of the other questions that I have in the queue was, in your experience thus far, what's the number one objection that IT managers have to adoption of Connections? And then what's the most effective response to that objection?
Most IT managers, as far as Connections, it's not something that they come right out and say, but it's the concept of losing control. It's a matter of, this stuff's going to go crazy. I'm not going to be able to control this. People are just going to start creating stuff everywhere. How are we going to maintain it? How are we going to structure it? And part of that fear comes from, in some cases, what we've seen happen in cases of some tools like SharePoint. SharePoint kind of goes viral and everybody starts using it, but because it's a container model, it's really hard to determine what's being used and what's not being used, what's useful, what's not, where everything is. The social network is not that way. It's one of the great things about our network is that when you put something in the network, I don't care if you put it in a blog, a wiki, a forum, inside of a community, I don't care where you put it. If it's marked public, I can get to it, and then I can get to it just by easily searching and finding it. And so it's not a matter of me having to know what container it's in. So a lot of the fears that are from IT people are around the control aspect and how do we manage this. And often is the case with IT, it's a matter of their fear is like a lot of fears. They think of, gee, we've got Twitter throughout our organization of people tweeting, and I've lost control of that, and I don't want to come back and say I want this to happen. I'm trying to manage this. I'm trying to keep it locked down. You have to kind of let IT know, look, you're not going to lose control. In fact, I tell people it's like golf or tennis. Sometimes loosening your grip helps your shot. Sometimes you got to lose some control to gain it. That's why in this case, it's often not the best case to go to IT first. IT to me in a social work world is somewhat of a toll booth. You'll eventually have to go through them, and you'll have to let them know what's going on. You'll have to assure them that it will work and it'll fit within their environment. But that's not where you start your journey. You start your journey in the car. You get in the car with the marketing people or the corporate communications people or HR people who have initiatives around engaging employees or being more innovative as a company or breaking into new markets. You find those people with those initiatives, you get in the car with them and you say, okay, now here's where we're going to go. And this is how social is going to get us there. And yes, we're going to come to a toll booth and it's your ID department, but guess what? We got it covered. We run on all the platforms they need. We meet with the corporate standards, whatever. And if you want to go smooth with the IT people ahead of time and make sure that you go through the toll booth nicely, that's fine. But don't stand in the toll booth. Because if you stand there with the IT people every day, cars are going to pass by and there are going to be people with Microsoft in the car doing a SharePoint project or Jive in the car or somebody who's gone out and just used Yammer for free and they're chatting, and IT now is all of a sudden being tasked with trying to get control of it. So, I don't mind addressing IT managers, but my challenge is often they're not the ones who are actually going to make this happen. It's business people that are going to make it happen, but IT people have to be engaged. But it's not a control issue. Any other questions?
That's all I have in the queue right now, but I know Phil had some slides that he wanted to go through now that we've talked about what Connections is and what it does.
Sure, I'll pass over to him.
How you go about getting it. So if you could pass the ball over to Phil.
I'll do that. Phil,
thanks, Don. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Very good. Thanks for that, Lewis. That was excellent. So, hi, GBS. My name is Phil Dipietro, and I am the Channel Sales Manager for the Southeast. I do manage GBS. So Lewis is definitely the guru about Connections and the evangelist, if you will. But if you have any questions about pricing or sales plays or licensing, I can certainly reach out to me, or if Dawn wants to facilitate those conversations, you can reach out to Dawn and she can ask me a question. But I just wanted to tell you a little bit today about a sales play. I know we only have 7 minutes left, so I only have 4 slides here, but this is a very exciting sales play called kind of extending your reach with the social business agenda. So this sales play was just announced yesterday from Sandy Carter. So it's valid in Q2. It expires on June 15th, and the agenda is an acronym here. So we at IBM, not like we have enough acronyms, but we decided to do another one here with the social business. so we'll just go over it briefly. You want to align organizational goals and culture. As Lewis was saying, you want to gain some friends through the social trust. Whether or not you're an expert, maybe you know someone in your organization who might be. You can just basically make a recommendation to someone else if you're looking to gain some advantages. Whether it be HR, finance, anyone can use this stuff and really see the value. And connecting through those people is really where you're going to see that aforementioned value. Engage through experiences. You can network some of your business processes here. And design a reputation and risk management. So you can negate some of that risk management there, and you can analyze some data too with all of the data that is located in Connections. And as Lewis said before, there is no data mining in this stuff. It is your information. It's your proprietary stuff, so that is definitely something that separates us from our competitors. So this is kind of something that customers struggle with. So something that Sandy mentioned in the sales play yesterday, I definitely wanted to let GBS know, is that I can share all of this information with my business partners. We cannot share this information with clients, but since GBS is a BP, we can certainly enable you with selling this type of stuff, whether it be references, what kind of starting questions you can ask for a sales play. I know that there's actually an email that a prospecting email that we can send out, which I can send along to Don if you guys are interested in maybe doing a little campaign around it like we are here. But this is kind of stuff that customers struggle with when we start talking about connections. So customer service, HR stuff, increasing market on new products, a strong ROI on marketing campaign investment. So all this stuff is what you want to ask customers. Are they having issues? Are they looking at social software like Connections? Are they struggling with any of these? And maybe a trial or a pilot of Connections might be something that they want to look at to just circumvent some of these challenges. So there's some values of this. Here's some numbers. I just wanted to throw this in here. The best slide will be the next slide, which will actually be the sales play, which we're pretty excited about here at IBM. It's our most aggressive sales play is for Connections, and the one that Sandy Carter started off with on our call yesterday for Q2 sales plays. So here's just some quick numbers I just wanted to throw together. Basically benefits include you can save millions of dollars in increased process, a rate increase of about 15%, using social business to increase conversion rates from marketing campaigns. HR, again, HR loves this stuff as far as just training and ramping up new employees. You don't have to get everyone in a room or a certain location. They can just access the stuff via the web, whether it be behind the comfort of their own house or in their office. They can access this stuff anywhere. And instead of having all of the employees come to a training location, they can use this from the comfort of their own home or a Starbucks or things like that. So the accessibility on this stuff really is able to circumvent costs with travel and just saving a lot of time as well, which is really super important. So there are some just brief values there. I can certainly send along these numbers as well. But the actual sales play is going to be, we're going to offer 50% off Connections. So I don't know if you guys know the basic pricing of Connections, but I can certainly get the details of that. I can send, again, Don some information. But we're offering 50% off Connections for white space accounts to progress transactions this quarter. So we're very excited about that. It is a very aggressive rate. So you can kind of go to bat and say today that our current Connections offering, we can, for current white space accounts, again, 50% off. And also there's a knockout play for SharePoint. So Lewis was saying before, some faulty products and features in SharePoint. If you are talking to any of your current customers about SharePoint and some pain that they're experiencing there, we're offering 50% off Connections in current SharePoint accounts, which is something that we're very excited about as a takeout plan. So I know that there was some brief talk about Connections 4. There's also some talk about some on integration where, maybe we can go in and kind of have a coexisting environment between SharePoint and Connections. So that's stuff that customers are excited about. So once you have Connections in there, they can see the advantage of that. It doesn't have to be just SharePoint or Connections. Our IBM software integrates with all other software offerings. So we're very excited. So we can definitely compete with the Microsofts and Googles of the world. We're very confident about that, which is why we're going to bat with this offering. But again, there's my contact information. down below. Again, Lewis is more of an evangelist and kind of a social guru. I am the guy that you want to talk about licensing, sales plays, putting together quotes for you. Also, if you need to put together a quote with this sales play, I'm going to need to do a special bid on my side, and I will work with you directly on that to process a special bid. Since this is a pre-approved sales play, it's pretty seamless as far as getting a quick turnaround. So I'm certainly happy with facilitating that. So please reach out at any time, and I'll send the information about the sales play specifically and all of this onto Don. She can send a follow-up email. So is there any questions about that?
And that concludes this edition of Group Talk. Thanks for watching. To engage in conversations with us, visit twitter.com/gbsknows. To stay up to date, like us on Facebook at facebook.com/joingbs. And to watch entertaining and informative videos, visit youtube.com/gbsknows. And don't forget, visit our website and send us an email at gbs.com and info@gbs.com. Thanks again.